Hey everybody, welcome to Proline, direct from Las Vegas. I'm Dave Cook and joined by Jim Feist. And the NFL preseason is at our doorstep. We're going to give you some preseason wagering strategies, as well as check up on some AFC teams to look at, and the always interesting NFL coaches on the hot seat. First, Jim, if people subscribe to the channel, it's free, and there's lots of free stuff that goes with that as well.
Absolutely, Dave. Go to ProlineTV.com. Click on the subscribe button. You'll get notifications on new videos. Plus, you'll be sent a code to get 7 days of my service absolutely free. That's ProlineTV.com.
And I've been on a very nice run lately in Major League Baseball and the CFL, for that matter. It's been really good over the past month or so. And July is turning into an outstanding month overall. Now, August is going to be just as good, and there's still some time to go in July. So here's what we're going to do. There's 36 days, if you include July and August, football and baseball, 36 days for $36. And all the value plays are included in that. So call the toll-free number, 855-472-2577. $1 a day, you can't go wrong, and you're connecting at the right time because things have been going very well. They have for you as well, Jim. 60 and 36 is the baseball run, 44 and 16 on the baseball high rollers.
Dave, it's been absolutely incredible. Those high rollers are $500 a piece, $2,500 per week. Why? Because they win. Here's the monster special, 7 days of my high rollers in baseball for $250. That's 90% savings. Get on board with my top plays. 44 and 16 run 866-546-9467. Before I move on, though, Dave, you never mentioned you're 17 and 5 right now.
Yeah, it's been a good run.
Yes.
I forgot the numbers.
Yes, you did.
All right.
I
Well,
didn't.
I'll tell you one thing I haven't forgotten, and that's general preseason strategies. Now, each game individually has to be weighed on its own, obviously.
Correct.
But there are certain things that you want to look for in doing preparation work for all these games. And the first thing I begin with is evaluating the backup quarterbacks, because they're going to see most of the action in the preseason. And I think it's really important to have a good feel as to whether these are guys that are going to be able to move the ball down the field and put a few points on the board, or whether they're guys who just aren't going to be able to get it done even in August football.
Well, and also, you're 100% right. Let's take one team, for example, right away. Let's look at the Texans, Houston Texans. They have a second-year coach, I believe it is, in O'Brien? Or is it third year? Third year, okay. Yeah. They got to the playoffs last year. Hoyer, absolute mess. He's gone. Now they bring in Osweiler. They signed a lot of money to him. They got Savage behind him and Whedon. Now, why does that matter? In preseason, it really does matter because your starting quarterback isn't going to play that many downs. These other guys that are going to come in behind him are not generally going to be facing first-string defenses. So a guy like Savage, who's got a little bit of regular season experience, and Whedon, who has a lot of regular season experience, are going to be able to pick apart those defenses. So when you have that type of a backup system in the second and third string quarterback, you can put up a lot of points, and it might be, if they're not too big a favorite, of course, they might be a good bet.
Now, coaching strategy also comes into the play. And this is where you have to do a lot of reading, because coaches are sometimes going to tell you what they're going to do, not specifically in terms of what the exact game plan is going to be. I mean, they're not going to tell you what the plays are in advance, but you can get a feel sometimes for how a team is approaching things. Now, generally, the rule of thumb, early on, coaches, first game, the starters are out there for maybe a couple of series, correct, and that's about it. Second game, a little bit longer. Third game is usually the dress rehearsal, if you want to call it that, for the regular season. Fourth game, for most teams, will be let's just get through this without anybody getting hurt.
Correct.
Keep things very vanilla. What I'm looking for in preseason is deviations from that norm, and you do get them. I can't tell you what they're going to be now because it's too early, but you start digging on Monday, looking for games that are being played later on in the week, and it starts in week 2, really, where you're going to get information from beat reporters who cover these teams on a daily basis as to maybe some things that are out of the ordinary as far as the projected rotation for that week, or in terms of what the team might be doing in terms of a game plan. The key word for me has always been evaluation. If you hear a coach say they're evaluating talent, that basically means they don't have a game plan. They just want to get through it. If you hear something different, that's a team that might be preparing for it more like it's a real game. And those are teams you want to be on in preseason.
Absolutely right, Dave. You know, one of the things you have to think about when you're talking about beat writers, some of them are very, very good, and they have really good connections with the team, so they get good information. Other guys, they're making $50 an article or something. They're not really connected. They don't pick up. They kind of make up stuff. It's kind of like some handicappers. Some of them actually handicap games and they initiate stuff. Others follow. And that happens with beat writers as well. So let's take a look at the Cleveland Browns. For example, I like to give examples if I can. They have a quarterback situation with Griffin and McCown. And I'm not sure who the third guy is. But anyway, they're probably going to be...
I think it might be you. Their depth chart is not impressive.
Boy, if they've slipped that far, then they're in trouble anyway. Probably one of the two worst teams in football. But here, the new coach, new game plans, new schematics, new, everything. So they're testing a lot of stuff. They're not going to be very good, and they probably won't win 4 games for the whole season, maybe 5 at the tops. But that type of team is going to be doing a lot of experimenting. Yeah, they might want to win a couple games to sell tickets, but I doubt that's going to matter. Most of the people in Cleveland know they got a loser with the Browns, so they're not going to get that excited. But that's the type of stuff you should look for.
There are also some interesting preseason trends, which our crack research department dug up.
Yes, they did.
And they kind of make sense.
These do. They actually do.
Well, that's the thing. If there's, I've never been a big trend guy, unless it's something where there's a rationale, so that you can explain why something is working. If you tell me, I don't know, Team A is 6-2 against the spread, if their bus stalls on the way to the game, that's not a trend, okay? But there are some, and we've got a couple we can tell you about that do make some sense, and they might be worth following this preseason once again.
Absolutely. Let's take a home team. They win the game by 30 points, or they score 30 points, which is damn good in preseason. You usually don't have your offense out there that long, unless, of course, the other team's defense is that pathetic and they gave up some big plays. But if they do well and they win by a lot, they score 30 points, in the next game you might see that team slough off a little bit because they've accomplished. I remember something. These preseason games mean absolutely nothing except for the egos of the coaches and the players. So if there's teams, you might get teams that have nothing going on giving a big effort, but you're not going to see top teams giving a big effort. They want to protect their players. So if they happen to have a 30-point game and they win the game well, that they're going to back off a little bit the second week.
No, there's a flip side to that.
Yes.
Because we have a team that played really well and scored a bunch of points at home. They're happy. Their fans are happy. Maybe not so much focus the next week. The reverse of that, and I really, you know what? To me, it doesn't matter if it's preseason or regular season. Nobody wants to get shut out. You just have it just leaves a bad taste in your mouth. And even in the preseason, we've seen interesting development here. This is going all the way back to 1983. Teams that were blanked in the preseason got shut out. The next game, 35-24 straight up. That's just under 60%. 35-23-1 against the spread, which is 60%. Doesn't mean they're all going to win, but it's a little bit of an edge, and it might be an indicator that team has a bad game and got shut out. They might want to make some kind of a statement for themselves the next week.
Absolutely makes sense. And Dave, you and I, neither one of us are trend players. No. But these trends here, they actually make sense when you think about the coaches, what they want to accomplish, the players, how much time they're going to be playing the next game. Remember, these are not regular season games, and they don't matter. After the 4 games they play in preseason, it all goes back to 0-0, and they got 16 games in the regular season.
Some coaches like to win, whether the games count or not. And one coach we know who has a great record against the spread in preseason is Pete Carroll. 24-12-1 against the spread. That's pretty good. So there's something you want to mark down going in. It doesn't mean, well, we're automatically going to play Seattle. Okay? But it might mean that, you know what? We know what his tendencies are. Let's not play against Seattle.
Well, they might have a little bit to prove this year because they started out so slow last year, coming off 2 Super Bowl appearances, which they didn't get to last year. They got far, but they started off so slow. So you might see this team coming out with a little bit more effort. They did lose Marshawn Lynch.
Yes.
They, got some things that they have to protect in the backfield.
I like Rawls. I think Rawls is going to be he's not Marshawn Lynch, but I think he'll be a nice player. All right, listen. Hey, if you have any questions on sports betting, especially from a Las Vegas perspective, go to ProlineTV.com. Be sure to hit the subscribe button to get 7 days of action free.
That's right. Plus, go to JimFeist.com for free stats, articles, videos, podcasts, my free fast facts. Absolutely love those. And plays from the nation's top handicappers.
All right, when we come back, we're going to take a look at some AFC teams to keep an eye on during the preseason, including, he's going to be out for 4 games. He's not going to be back till October. Who's going to quarterback the Patriots in August? Is Brady going to play some? Let's talk about the Patriots, because this is really the most interesting situation going into the preseason and the regular season. Now, in the past, we know Tom Brady is going to be standing on the sidelines, going to have a cap on, and he's not going to be playing at all in the preseason. But this year, things could be a little bit different. Do they play Brady here? Because he's suspended for the first 4 games of the regular season. So, do they put him out there for some extra work in the preseason just to make sure he doesn't have a ton of rust come week 5 of the NFL regular season? I'm going to say no. I don't think things are going to change, Jim, and I think that's going to be one of the fascinating things to watch. But I think it's going to be Garoppolo in the preseason. I think they want him to get as many reps as they can. And I'm not locking myself into this, but I'm probably going to be looking to play on the Patriots early in the preseason because I think Garoppolo is going to be seeing more action early than most projected number 1 quarterbacks for the regular season.
I agree with the first part of your statement, but I'm not too sure about the second part of your statement. The first part of your statement is I do not feel that they're going to, of course, you can never fully read Bill Belichick because other than the fact we know he likes to win every game he goes out there, even in preseason, he does have a winning record. With Brady normally sitting on the sidelines, this is where I agree with Dave, and the fact that he can't play the first 4 regular season games, it doesn't make sense to put him out there. Just go through the conditioning stuff, go through the training camp, work as hard as he can, and then those 4 weeks that he's off, they'll find ways, I'm sure, to stay in shape, et cetera, et cetera. But this part that I don't agree with Garoppolo is if you play him too much in the preseason, what happens if he gets hurt? I mean, now you don't have Brady for those first 4 games, and you're really screwed because now you're going to your 3rd string. I don't even know who the 3rd string is, Dave. Do you?
Oh, yeah, Brissett. The kid out of NC State.
Okay. That's not a lot of pro experience there.
No.
So I don't see them playing Garoppolo a lot in the preseason. I mean, they're going to have to play him a little bit. There's no question. Maybe in the setup game, which is week 3, perhaps, and then rest him in week 4. But I don't see him playing him a lot. And Brady's going to sit on the sidelines.
All right, so I'm checking this out. This is Scott Zolik and Mike Flynn discussing, and these are Patriots guys. Zolik, of course, you remember him as a player. Okay, this is what they're talking about as far as Garoppolo in the preseason. I don't think you play Brady. Garoppolo has to take the first team reps. You have to get Brissett ready and out there. Maybe those dual workouts with the Saints and Bears is where Brady gets a lot of work rather than the games.
Right.
And Brissett doesn't get those reps. Garoppolo needs to prepare all week like he's the starter, warm up as the starter, run out to the field as the starter. That's your huddle for 1, 2, 3, or all 4 quarters, whatever it might be. That's what he needs, the ability to go out there and make the decisions. So
great information.
yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And this is why we say, look, we're giving opinions, okay? But if you want good information, make sure and follow. I'm not talking about the off-the-wall websites where it's some guy like myself who's just expressing an opinion. Someone who's connected to the teams, and this is all 32 NFL teams. You can find people like this. They get you information in the preseason that oftentimes is straight from the coach's mouth, and it can put money in your pocket. It's worked for Jim and myself for years. We've made money in the preseason. And for those who say, how can you bet on games that don't count? Because you get information that does count in the preseason.
And you don't get that information in the regular season because everybody's trying to win. But the key part of what Dave is saying, and he didn't say it, but it's there, the odds makers don't know as much when they're putting up the numbers as we do by the time we make the plays.
That's why
that gives you the edge.
You'll get some volatility in those preseason numbers because once the information gets out, people get there quickly. So you got to get ahead of the game in this. You can't wait till Thursday or Friday and then start doing your preseason work. The Jets situation. I think they've got a pretty good football team.
They do. They really do.
And I'm not saying that Ryan Fitzpatrick is an all-pro quarterback, but don't you have to have Fitzpatrick
31
under center
touchdowns
right now?
last year. 31 touchdowns.
Well, they're not going to win anything with the kid from West Virginia, Geno Smith. Come on, he can't play.
That's a joke. He's a backup at best.
Right.
Yeah.
So what do they do here?
This has not been a championship organization for a long, long time, and it starts at the top. Here's a guy that can play football. Here's a guy that knows how to connect with his receivers, knows how to work hard. We all know he's smart. He 31 touchdowns, 14 interceptions last year. That's remarkable. There aren't that many quarterbacks in the league that threw over 30 touchdowns and had less than half in turnovers. Pay the guy. And they were only going to pay him $6 million the second and third year of the contract.
With the way the market is right now, you can't do that.
Osweiler gets $17 million. He's an unproven guy. I like the guy, and I think he has a future. But if Fitzpatrick is still young enough to be productive for a couple of years, pay the guy. If you want to win, pay him.
Speaking of Houston Texans, Osweiler is their new quarterback.
Yep.
We've talked about the fact they've got two other guys in camp who are decent players.
Yes.
I think there's pressure on Osweiler here. I mean, he's got to deliver from week one, or there will be a quarterback controversy. So this might be one of those situations where, they've got to improve the offensive line. I think this is one of those teams that needs to show some cohesiveness, even in I almost said spring training, even in training camp and the exhibition games. They've got to establish that they can protect Osweiler right from the opening.
I think the Texans are a dangerous team this year. I think they have the ingredients. O'Brien, I believe, is a good coach. Inexperienced. I don't like the way he handled the team last year. First game, starting Hoyer and then benching him for the set. That was bonehead Bush League stuff, and I hope we learned from that. If that type of behavior continues with the head coach, he will be gone because that was not right. Now, Hoyer proved he was okay, but when we got to the pressure situation in the playoffs, he really blew up. Now they've changed that whole chemistry there. They've got Osweiler. They paid him big bucks. They've got a solid team, and you've got to remember who's in that division. The Colts, everybody talks about the Colts and all that, but they're not that good. Their offensive line has been absolutely terrible. And Andrew Luck had got murdered, just banged around by the defenses. They have a chance this year to take over that division and win that division and move forward into the playoffs. Osweiler played well for Denver last year. A lot of drops by the receivers, and they benched him. And I don't believe he wanted to go back there in Manning's footsteps. I think he was pissed at being benched, and he wanted to move on. He got big bucks for it. So that's what one team pays $17 million to a guy who's unproven. Another team won't pay half that much to a guy that is proven. I don't get it.
We have free plays every day that you can get. They're easy to get. All you have to do is punch in a few digits on the cell phone and you're all set.
That's right. You just text the word game to 25827. That's the word game to 25827, and you'll get free plays each and every day right to your cell phone. That's game to 25827.
All right. It's one of the most fun topics to talk about. Not for the guys involved, actually, but for those of us who analyze football and are just fans of the game. NFL coaches on the hot seat and what it means for 2016. We'll do that next, right here on ProLineTV.com. We're going to identify 6 coaches. Let's talk about 6 coaches that I think are unquestionably on the hot seat going into this season. They've got to produce something positive, or they're not going to be there in 2017. And everybody knows who one of them is, and that's Rex Ryan. It's playoffs or bust for the Ryans in Buffalo. No question in my mind about that.
Well, now you got two of them. You got Rex and Rob. And, I go back to Rex as a head coach, and I've never been super excited about him as a head coach. Bless you.
Thank you.
And Rob.
It's the dry heat.
Yeah, in the 110 degrees.
Yeah.
I'd like to know. That's in the shade, by the way. 118, 120 is more like it. But anyway, we're not supposed to tell you that, or you won't come here and visit. But Rex and Rob, I think that combo up in Buffalo is a mess. When you look at the defense last year under Rex, who's supposed to be also a defensive coach, they fell way off. I mean, their statistics. I mean, they were number 4, and they went down
So
19 or 20.
reputation, not reality.
Yeah, it's right. It is, and I think Rex has been blessed. I mean, his father was a great defensive coach. He was blessed. He got with the Jets, and that's when Manning and the Colts backed off in the second half to get to the playoffs. They shouldn't have. I mean, this whole thing. They have done well in one situation. Every time they play the Patriots, they give them a real hard time.
Here's the problem I have, and I think this is, if this was still the 1980s or the 1990s, what the Ryan brothers do as far as their approach goes would still probably pay off. But it's not. It's a different mindset out there with officiating and player safety and things like that, and that's not going to change, okay? You could say, well, I used to play football like men back in the old days. No, I don't care about that, okay? Because all I care about is how they're calling games now. And the fact is that if you play the style with a complete lack of discipline that we have on Rex Ryan teams and Rob Ryan teams, you're going to get penalties galore, and they're going to kill your team, and you're going to lose football games because of that. You cannot be taking 120 yards and penalties in a game and expect to win.
Did they lead the league last year in penalties?
I think they did, yeah.
They were just terrible. On their discipline factor is way low. Very bad.
Yeah, it is. All right, so let's talk about some others. Jeff Fisher, and I know obviously the family connection there is big for him with the Rams. It's probably why he's still coaching the team, but they got to make some kind of a splash in L.A., and he can't have another losing season.
Is it 9 or 10 years in a row now he hasn't had a winning season? It's something in that range.
It isn't good, I know that.
No, and normally we're talking about coaches on the hot seat. He's been on the hot seat if you're looking at production for the last 7 years, but he's there, so it probably is a family connection that keeps him there. It certainly isn't performance on the field. Now they got the big move and all the things they're doing. A lot of money being spent, and I respect him as a football guy, but as a head coach, he's been pretty dismal.
All right, so what do we do with Jim Caldwell? Now, Caldwell's interesting because I think it pretty much looked like a done deal that he was going to get canned at the end of the 2016 season until the Lions got rolling in the second half of the season. They could have been 7-1 down the stretch if it wasn't for the Aaron Rodgers Hail Mary.
That's right.
So Caldwell got to stick around, but he's definitely on the hot seat going into this season.
You would think he is. I mean, they started 1-7 last year, and then they ended up 6-2 at the end. But like Dave said, the Aaron Rodgers Hail Mary, which was a remarkable play, and very fortunate to happen for the Packers, they would have been 7-1, so they'd have switched the whole thing around, gone 8-8 on the year. They have a lot of talent there, and they're not the upper echelon of talent, but there's enough talent throughout the entire roster that they could produce. I mean, they're got the Bears in that division, which I am not that high on the Bears.
No.
I think Minnesota and the Packers are going to fight it out for the division lead, and the Lions could be dangerous. I haven't checked off their non-division schedule, but they can be dangerous. Caldwell is, like you said, on the hot seat. I agree with that. It's not as hot as some of the other guys.
The San Diego Superchargers have not been Superchargers the last couple of years.
No.
It's a mess. They've had a ton of injuries. They don't even know when they're going to be playing in the future. Mike McCoy, I don't know if you can pin this on Mike McCoy, but I think that he's probably going to end up on the chopping block. I know they made some changes. They brought in Wizenhunt, who's back to being an assistant, and that should be his strength. But I don't know. I look at this roster, and I just don't see where they can win a lot of football games.
I agree with you. I think the Chargers' problems go back to Marty Schottenheimer. Not his fault. But when they got rid of a guy like that.
14-2.
Yeah, I mean, that's just terrible. How can you be 14-2? And they get rid of him and they bring in Norm, or what was his name, the coach?
And now I'm blanking on it as well.
Yeah, but anyway, they brought in a guy that had a losing record, other coaches in other positions. The organization at the top of the San Diego team is bad. They're kind of like what the Jets are doing right now with Fitzpatrick. They make those kind of mistakes. They're not a winning organization, therefore they will not win. They're not going to win with this organization. They have a good quarterback. They've had that good quarterback for as long as Eli Manning's been in the league, because they both came out at the same time. He's excellent, leads the league in a lot of things, but they haven't produced an offensive line. They got rid of LT years ago. I mean, they got rid of Breeze years ago. This is an organization that I can't support.
Now, in the regular season, Marvin Lewis has put together a rather sterling record the last several years in Cincinnati. 5 years in a row they're in the playoffs. It's pretty good.
Damn good.
5 years in a row they lose in the first round of the playoffs, and really, it wasn't Marvin Lewis's fault in any way. I mean, just boneheaded plays cost them that game last year.
Oh, that was
just
tough.
awful. You can't really blame that on Lewis, but
well, in a way you can,
I
Dave,
guess
because
when
of
the
discipline.
pattern repeats itself.
When you have when you have players that are not disciplined and they act out and they don't realize what effect they have on the other guys in the entire city, that's the head coach. It has to go back to the head coach.
All right. Well, then Lewis has to be on the hot seat. He has to be.
Well, this run of getting to the playoffs is going to end at some point. These teams go up and they
Window's
go
gonna
down.
close.
At some point, this is going to go backwards. They're going to start losing some of these guys. They did lose some players this year in the offseason.
And one more. Jason Garrett, Dallas Cowboys, the assistant to the actual head coach, Jerry Jones.
Well, that's why he can't get fired, because the real head coach is Jerry.
Look, he's got to keep Romo on the field, which Garrett has no say as far as Romo's health is concerned.
Well,
but
actually,
if Romo's on the field, you got to think Dallas is going to improve this year and possibly be a playoff contender, which is what it's going to take for Garrett to keep his job. If Romo gets dinged up again, which I think is a real possibility because he's getting older and brittle, I think this is the end for Garrett.
Last year, the Cowboys had a lot of injuries, including Romo. Their offensive line is back together. It looks like they have a running game again, and if they do, with that offensive line protecting Romo, him being a little bit more conservative, watching his health a little bit more, they can keep him healthy. If they keep him healthy, let's look at their division. And you're talking about getting to the playoffs. Washington is okay, but they won the division last year because Philadelphia, the Giants, and Dallas were a mess, especially on defense when you're talking about the Giants. Horrible, even though Eli had a darn good year. But this is the best team in the NFC East. And if they win that division, they're in the playoffs, and that's where they want to be. If you can keep him healthy by running the ball more like they did 2 years ago with DeMarco Murray, then they're back.
And we're going to be back next week, but first we want to tell you about free plays that you can get every day. And they're on a recorded message from our Vegas experts. Just call toll-free 888-478-9222.
That's right. And also at ProlineTV.com. Click on the subscribe button and get notifications on new videos. Plus, you'll be sent a code to get 7 days of my service absolutely free. That's ProlineTV.com.
That's it. Thanks for joining us. We will see you next week with another edition of Proline.